Check, check. Check, check. Do you have levels? Check, check. Check, check. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check, check. Check 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Microphone check. Candidate forum.
All right, great. Thank you. You're welcome.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? Just in case. I figured. Yeah, I'll get the troops in order. We should start getting them mic'd up. Paul right here, Cookie has them.
Do you guys want her to go out now? Or should we just wait? Oh, she's getting mic'd up.
All set?
Hope so.
As set as you're going to be.
As long as I'm on mute right now.
last night was Susan's evangelism.
Oh, yeah.
Which is kind of short
Yes.
because, you know, we're a little
And I saw
Yeah.
one of my,
And then it's
one
August
of
1st.
the young men who goes to my church. I saw him. I had no idea he sang in the choir. So I gave him the biggest hug. Like, I haven't seen him in years. Because he's back and forth from here to New York.
Yes.
Okay, 4 is on, 3 is on. You have 3. There's a switch on the top. You might have gotten switched on as you put it in your pocket or something. Make sure that it's you just got switched on.
Yeah, good evening. For everybody's information, we're going to be starting in about 2 minutes. So take your seats.
Tickets, please.
Actually, since you all got quiet so fast, I think we can start right now. My pleasure to introduce the Dean of this cathedral, the Very Reverend Penny Bridges.
Good evening. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you, Judge Jim, for that introduction. And my name is Penny Bridges. I'm the Dean or Senior Pastor, which is a more ecumenical way of putting it, of the cathedral. I'm hearing some feedback. There we go. I think that's been taken care of. I'm just delighted to be able to welcome all of you here this evening. And it's part of the job of a cathedral to be available to the community for important conversations, public conversations. And so it's very fitting that we are in here tonight to have this conversation and to hear from the candidates for the 4th District of the County Supervisors Board. It's wonderful to be doing this in partnership with our co-sponsors, San Diego Organizing Project and the San Diego Community News. We love our partnerships. We're always looking to expand how we can work with other organizations in the city. And thank you to our candidates for being brave enough to stand for election and to put yourselves out here on behalf of this community. Yeah. Couple of housekeeping items. We have bottles of water available in the back if you need some, and the bathrooms, should you need them, are out of this back door straight across the courtyard, and you can either go upstairs where there are straight ahead there are 2 gender-neutral bathrooms, or downstairs there is a ladies' room and a gentleman's bathroom as well. So plenty of availability of facilities. And now, let us pray. We call upon you, O Sacred One, the Creator of us all. We give you thanks for all who respond to your call to serve and to lead. We give you thanks for the privilege and blessing of a free society where we can vote and choose our leaders. And we ask this evening that you grant us the blessing of civil discourse. Give us compassion for those who are in need or underrepresented in leadership. Grant us unity in decisions that will benefit our community, and give wisdom to those who are elected. We ask these things in your sacred name. Amen.
Amen.
Now I'm going to hand back to Judge Jim Stiven and Drew Sitton, our moderators for the evening.
Thank you.
Tonight, we will be asking questions about racism, housing, jail deaths, the fentanyl crisis, and other tough issues facing our community. These questions were pre-selected by people from St. Paul's and the San Diego organizing projects. If there's time at the end, the audience will also have the opportunity to ask questions. Everyone should have received a comment card when they came in. At any point in this forum, you can fill that out and raise it up, and an usher will come and take it from you so that at the end it can be asked.
And the manner in which the questions will be posed to you, the members of the sponsoring organizations will pose the questions to you, and we'll rotate amongst you. And I want you to understand that you'll have 2 minutes. Each of you will have 2 minutes to answer the questions that are posed. After each of you have answered the questions with your 2 minutes, or less if you wish, you'll have an opportunity to take 30 seconds to respond. If you have something to add or want to respond to one of the other candidates, you may do so with a 30-second time limit. I'm going to ask the audience to restrain themselves and not applaud until a speaker is done with their presentation on each question. And then you may indicate your approval, if you wish. Reverend Richard Hogue, sitting to my right, will be the timekeeper, keeping time on the 2 minutes and the 30 seconds. He'll hold up a green card when you're going, a yellow card when you have 30 seconds left, and a red card when you are stopping, and then if you don't stop, he will ask you to stop. So, I think that is all that I need to cover at the onset. Do any of you have any questions about how we'll proceed? No, you're okay. I'm going to turn it back to Reverend Penny Bridges to introduce the candidates and to let the audience and Penny know that the first opening statement will be made by Amy.
Okay. So it's a great pleasure to introduce 3 of the 4 candidates for this office. Going from left to right, Monica Montgomery Stepp, Janessa Goldbeck, and Amy Reichert. And I'm sad to say that Paul McQuigg was not able to join us tonight. I guess, Amy, take it away.
Right here in San Diego. I was adopted when I was a little baby and given up for adoption and raised by a very loving family. I was raised Jewish. In fact, I attended Hebrew school and I had my bat mitzvah not too far from here, Temple Beth Israel, which was on 6th Avenue. And my dad was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was very young. My mom was the secretary, and before he was diagnosed with MS, he worked at FedMart. How many of you remember FedMart? Yes, it's the 1970s version of Walmart. And so it was very hard growing up because my mom, who was a secretary, became the breadwinner and the caregiver for our family and for my dad. I was very fortunate to go on and graduate from San Diego State University with a degree in political science. And then after I graduated from college, that's when I decided to look for my biological mom. My mom told me her name, and this was before Google, and I did it through skip tracing through public records, and I found her. And I realized, wow, I have a knack for this. And so I became a licensed private investigator, and I got my license in 1999, and I've had Amy Reichert investigations ever since. And I've been able to reunite long-lost loved ones. I've been able to search for deadbeat parents who owed child support, find teenage runaways. And just in the past couple of years, I felt moved to get involved. And I started speaking up for the safe reopening of schools and the safe reopening of businesses. And I'm very happy to say that in the process, we were also able to protect the civil rights of thousands of local workers. So I humbly come before you today with thanks that the church has opened up this community for this night. And I thank you very much.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Janessa Goldbeck. I was born and raised right here in San Diego County. My mom was a public school teacher in Vista. My dad drove a tow truck. I was really fortunate to go to undergraduate at Northwestern University, where I studied journalism and African studies. And as part of my education, spent some time in Uganda and Rwanda, where I learned that there was an ongoing genocide in the Darfur region of Sudan. And I was 19 years old. I wanted to do something about it, so I came back to the United States and started organizing on my campus. By the time I was a senior in college, I was the national organizing director for the student movement to save Darfur. And I moved to Washington, D.C. right out of college to become a professional human rights organizer. I spent the first chapter of my career working with both the Bush administration and then the Obama administration to pass federal legislation to protect civilians in conflict zones. And that work brought me into contact for the first time with members of the U.S. military who were providing civilian protection on the ground where some of our humanitarian operations were working. I thought it would make sense to have people who spoke both languages, the civil security as well as humanitarian. So I made a very strange choice at the age of 26. As an openly gay woman, I decided to join the United States Marine Corps. I spent the next 7 years as a combat engineer officer and also served as a uniformed victim advocate, working to help service members who had experienced sexual assault. And I probably would have stayed in a little bit longer, but two things happened. One, Trump got elected, and it became very scary to be an LGBTQ out service member. And two, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I'm an only child, my parents are divorced, and so I knew I had to come home to San Diego to take care of her. I witnessed firsthand how challenging it was navigating the system to get her the care that she needed. There were lots of people who didn't have the resources I had, someone with a master's degree, an officer in the military, and it was still very difficult for me. I know that so many San Diegans are facing similar, if not more, increasing challenges, that those things are putting them on the streets, that they are making it harder for them to live in San Diego because of the skyrocketing cost of living. And I want to take the years of experience I have as a policy advocate and put it to work right here in our community and make a difference. Thanks for being here tonight. Looking forward to the conversation.
Serve as the City Council member for the 4th District in the City of San Diego. I want to thank St. Paul's for opening up the beautiful cathedral for us to be here this evening and inviting the community in and partnering with SDOP and all other organizations that invited people to come out this evening. This is a very, very important race for our region, so we're really excited to see with such a short amount of time the involvement. Well, I'm excited to see the involvement that I have seen. I grew up in the supervisorial district. I went to a school called Robert E. Lee Elementary School that has since, the name has since been changed. The students actually led the charge in changing the name of that school, but I went every day from kindergarten to 6th grade to Robert E. Lee Elementary School. So I moved on to Bell Junior High School and went to Bonita Vista High, and I left San Diego to go to an historically black college in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's where I learned a lot about advocacy, about the civil rights movement, and about the sacrifices that those that came before me made for me to be here. I also got sick, really sick in college. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune illness. I had to come back home before I graduated. My mother had to take care of me and apply for county resources. But that experience has taught me how to speak truth to power. It has taught me to advocate for our most vulnerable communities. And I think the experience that I hold professionally and personally will really give me a unique lens in this seat. And I'm really glad to see you all and excited for the conversation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you all. I think we now get a little bit better to know you, and we'll have an opportunity to listen to your responses to the various questions. The first question, which is on the subject of becoming beloved community, will be posed by Jennifer Zhao, who is a parishioner here at St. Paul's Cathedral. Jennifer?
Good evening. In the past few years, the Episcopal Church, like many organizations nationwide, has been engaged in examining and making amends for the sin of racism by working toward more just, equitable, and inclusive communities. Yet we're seeing significant backlash against efforts to ensure the equal rights of all Americans. The question is, what have you done in your career and community to ensure that the people who have been most impacted by systemic racism are equitably represented in decision-making spaces, and how will you carry that forward if you are elected supervisor?
And I'll ask Janessa to answer first.
Sure. Well, I think, when I was growing up, it felt like we were moving towards a world that wasn't anywhere close to being perfect, but where we were trying at least to build a more tolerant and inclusive world. And in the last few years, we've seen a real backsliding and a real resurgence of very visible hate and intolerance in our community that's really scary. It isn't just something that happens outside of California. We've seen anti-LGBT, anti-Black, homophobic, anti-Semitic literature distributed all across our county in recent years. And we know that there are active efforts underway to undermine community organizations who are working to dismantle systemic racism. In my job, which I forgot to mention in my opening remarks, I run a national veterans advocacy organization representing over 1.5 million vets and military families nationwide. And when people think about veterans, often they think of a monolith, a specific type of person. But in reality, veterans increasingly represent the diversity of America. And in fact, the fastest growing demographics in the veterans community are women of color and LGBTQ women. So when I was offered the opportunity to lead one of the largest veterans advocacy organizations in the nation, in a space that is predominantly white men, straight white men, I took the opportunity because it gave me the option to be able to center the voices of marginalized communities who are not often in those spaces and in the halls of power. And so the issues that we focus on aren't just your traditional veterans issues, but things like access to reproductive health care. And I was very fortunate to be able, over the past year, to work hand in hand with the VA to lift up the voices of poor veteran women, and particularly in states where abortion is now criminalized, to push the VA to begin for the first time offering reproductive health care services to all veterans, regardless of what state they live in. And we were able to accomplish that by centering the voices of our Black and brown women veterans who were most vulnerable to this new law. I'm really proud of the work that we did, and I look forward to continuing that in my leadership at the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Monica?
So first I'm going to say thank you for framing the question in that way. We're talking about the beloved community that Dr. King talked about often, and framing racism as a sin. So thank you for that, because that is, I think, the lens that we need to look at this issue from. So a few things. This has been my life's work. I lead with love, and the reason why I lead with love, because I know that this world and this nation has oppressed people that do not have trust in government, because the government was not originally built for them. And so every day I wake up, I think about ways that we can continually dismantle a system that was not all-inclusive when it was built. In doing that work, I have led an institution to train Black women to lead. It was founded by Dr. Shirley Weber. I have also established the Office of Race and Equity at the City of San Diego, which we now look and make our budget decisions through an equity lens. I have fought our criminal legal system, and part of the reason why many folks who are in our positions or elected officials don't do that is because you get punished for speaking truth, and you get punished for calling out the fact that we have a racist criminal legal system that is a reiteration of slavery. But I continue to do that, and I will continue to do that work. But the most important work and impactful work that I have done so far is serve on our State Reparations Task Force. And for 2 years, we went through testimony and heard generation after generational trauma of what African Americans and descendants of slaves have been through in this nation and in this state. And we came up with an 1,100-page report that has many, many recommendations. Many of them are policy related, some of them are compensation related. But this is my life's work, and I will continue to do that at the county.
Thank you. And Amy?
Yes.
Being raised Jewish, I know very well the sting of anti-Semitism. I will never forget being in 2nd grade and a boy running up to me on the playground, a much older, larger boy, and he shoved his finger in my face and he said, "The Jews killed Jesus, you killed Jesus." And I just remember being horrified and experiencing that kind of anti-Semitism. And I went home and I told my mom, and my mom said, the same thing happened to me as a child. And so I may not know the struggle of being a gay woman in the military. I may not know the struggle of a black woman and facing racism in our society today. But I do have the lived experience, and I do understand the challenges that we face with racism right now. Anyone who says that racism does not exist is not living in reality. And we have to have a county supervisor who understands this and will bring communities together. I'm very happy to say that I am endorsed by the Equal Rights Foundation, and it's because of my commitment to civil rights in the past couple years. My nonprofit group that I formed just a couple years ago raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to fund a federal lawsuit, and we were successfully able to defend the civil rights of thousands of workers and save their jobs under the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title VII. And so what I can absolutely guarantee with you is I will never tear people apart. I will never engage in the culture wars. I will bring people together. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, each of you will have up to 30 seconds to add anything that you wish or to respond to any comments that were made by the other candidates. And you can do it at random. I'm not going to call on anybody, but somebody wants to speak, do it. Okay? You're good. Good. Well, thank you. The second question that will be posed is on the subject of housing, and it will be posed by Christy Figueroa, who is a member of the San Diego Organizing Project.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Before we get started, I just want each of you to look to your left and let somebody know your race matters. Look to your left and let them know.
Let them know what?
Look to your right. Look to your right, shake their hand, and tell them your voice matters.
Your voice matters. I heard that your voice matters.
You all matter. Thank you guys for that.
I like that. Good energy.
Touches home. I went to Lee. I was with Obama. I got the inauguration, so all of that. So last year, the Board of Supervisors passed a joint resolution with the City of San Diego to address the severe shortage of affordable homes in our region by removing all the barriers to development and leveraging public, private, and philanthropic funds to increase housing production. While increasing production is critical to meet long-term needs, we also need measures to preserve affordability, protect tenants, and to prevent displacement so that residents aren't forced to spend more than 30% of their income on housing, be priced out of their communities, or face homelessness. If you are elected supervisor, what specific measures will you put forward or support to balance housing, production efforts, and increase tenant protections and home ownership opportunities, especially for BIPOC and other low-income communities that are at the greatest risk of being priced out?
And Monica, you'll go first.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. So I want to start off by saying that we really, when we talk about housing, we have to think about homelessness and the issues and problems and crises that we face in this region. Right now, for every 10 people that are able to exit homelessness, there are 13 that are entering for the very first time. And a more recent study has shown us that although, yes, there are many, many people who suffer with mental illness and other issues on the street, the majority of the issue does come from economics and the fact that folks that are entering homelessness cannot afford to pay rent, cannot afford to live here. So you are absolutely right in that we have to build, and there are many things that we have to build, that we have to do to streamline that process to make it quicker. But on the other side, we have to be proactive and protect the people that are $200, $300, $400 away from making their rent. So we do have, the county has a pilot program, but the city does as well. We have passed the tenant protections ordinance to ensure that tenants are not priced out of the market when they do have to move, that they receive additional funding in order to move. But I would also say, as a County Board of Supervisor and facing the crisis that we're facing, we have to look at the impacts of rent stabilization, and we have to bring measures forward that will stabilize this market, because it is getting ridiculous, and that is the impact in what we're seeing on our streets. So I have taken those votes. I have done that work, and it is not an easy place to be, because there are a lot of interests and a lot of different stakeholders. But as I stated before, my priority will be our most vulnerable communities, because there is a holistic approach that we have to take in order for us all to thrive.
Thank you. Amy?
Well, in 2020, when we were all struggling with the pandemic, what we saw were greedy investors come into San Diego, one investment group called BlackRock, and they were buying up huge swaths of single-family homes when the interest rates were at historic low rates. And they're also buying up all of these buildings. And what they've been doing is they've been systematically evicting people from these apartment complexes, and that's absolutely wrong. We have to protect tenant rights. The other phenomena that's been going on that a lot of people are not aware of is the phenomena of Airbnbs. You see, our population has declined by 50,000 since 2020, but now what's going on with Airbnbs is they're only supposed to have one license, but there is a loophole. And what they are doing is entire apartment buildings are all Airbnbs. So places that could be affordable for people to live instead are pseudo hotels. So I would absolutely put a stop to greedy corporations. To give you some background too, I was a single mom for several years. There was a point when I could not afford the increasing rent, and I moved in with another single mom, and I shared a room with my son, so I know about this firsthand. And when it comes to our BIPOC communities, who have been historically discriminated against with redlining, we especially have to have not only affordable housing in areas where we can have community land trusts, which is something that I've been speaking with other Board of Supervisors, which is a way to make it more affordable, to avoid gentrification, and also displacement. But bottom line, the best thing that people can do to build wealth and have rent security is to be able to buy a home. So I would be for those programs to help people buy. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And Janessa.
Well, we've seen recently, I think earlier this week, it was reported that rents in San Diego County now exceed the rent in San Francisco. People are being displaced from their homes who are on fixed incomes because they can't keep up. And when I think about housing and homelessness, there are a couple of ways the county can really step up. One is the county has an excess of land, and we also oversee health and human services at the county. And we have a real shortage of shelters that meet our currently unhoused population's needs. And so as much as we need to invest in building more housing at every income level in places where it makes sense to do that, we also need to take care of the emergency that is at our hands and on our doorstep right now, and that is the thousands of people who are living unsheltered. Right now, our largest growing population in our homeless community are people over the age of 55. Over 29% of people who are homeless in San Diego County are seniors, many of whom are homeless for the very first time. These are people who raised their families here, contributed to their communities, held jobs, and are now being priced out because of skyrocketing costs and inflation. So one thing that we can do is ensure that there are shelters for folks who are already on the street that meet their needs. Right now there's no shelter in San Diego County where if you can't meet your activities of daily life on your own, climb up to a top bunk or use a restroom on your own, there is no shelter in San Diego County that will take you overnight because the liability is too high. That is an emergency. The county needs to prioritize that right away. Second, prevention. How do we keep people who are on the cusp from falling into homelessness in the first place? Well, a recent study from the University of California said for 85% of people living on the streets, they said that a difference of $300 to $500 a month would have kept them housed. The county has a pilot program right now with seniors to provide that stipend to landlords so that they can keep their housing if rents go up. I'd like to see that program expanded to more seniors. Right now it's 200 folks. I'd like to see it expanded to a lot more people and made permanent so that we can keep people in their homes.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And now again, an opportunity to take 30 seconds to add any comments that you wish or to respond. Annika?
Yes, just one. I didn't mention this, but I am a co-chair of the City County Reinvestment Task Force, and through my leadership there, San Diego was 1 out of 8 cities in the nation to receive $7.5 million for down payment assistance for BIPOC first-time home buyers, and so expanding programs like that would be very, very important through my already regional leadership.
Amy?
I would just like to express my deep concern about SB 10, because SB 10 bulldozes single-family homes, and in their place, high-rises with expensive high rents are built in their place. And again, these are owned by corporations, and it doesn't give people an opportunity to buy. So again, I'm very, very concerned about big corporations manipulating the rental market, and so that's why I'm concerned about SB 10.
I think we could probably spend the next hour talking about housing and homelessness, so I do just want to add one point. I currently sit on the county's Behavioral Health Advisory Board, where we hear every month from the Director of Behavioral Health Services, Dr. Luke Bergman, about the issues that they're facing working with folks who are on the streets who have acute psychiatric disorders or are struggling with addiction. And this county, we are short about half of the psychiatric beds that we need for folks who are in crisis. And it's anticipated that we'll have a shortage of 18,000 behavioral health workers in the next decade. So that absolutely has to be something that we prioritize as well.
Well, thank you all for your responses on this important topic. Our third question will be on the subject of immigration. And the question will be posed by Gloria Morales Palos, who is a parishioner at Christ the King Catholic Church and co-chair of the San Diego Organizing Project.
Good evening. In 2022, the County of San Diego established a legal defense program to ensure that immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers going through removal proceedings have access to due process. But the program stalled in the 2023-2024 budget cycle. My question is, do you support fully funding the legal defense programs with an annual allocation of $5 to $8 million? And if you are elected supervisor, how will you advocate at the state and federal levels for funding to ensure that the live application of our rights and right to due process?
And Amy, you'll go first.
So I met the love of my life when I was 16 years old on a blind date, and he had a green card, and he was born in Lima, Peru. So he immigrated to this country when he was 8 years old. Later on, we were married, and we have a son that we share together. And so he was able to become a naturalized U.S. citizen. And so he went through that process, eventually went to law school, and then went on to practice in immigration. And so this is an issue that I know firsthand. Absolutely, people deserve due process and deserve to be represented when they are going to immigration court. I know firsthand because of so many family members having to navigate that system without legal representation. And yes, we are obligated to provide for people who are navigating the immigration courts. And I will share another story. Some very good friends of mine, Cindy and Fito Gonzalez. And my friend Fito, he was deported from the United States about 10 years ago. He was born in Tijuana, and then he came here when he was just an infant. When he was 18 years old, he was arrested. He had a gun and also drugs. Now, later in life, after he was released from prison, they did deport him, and then he came back. So I met Fito when he was here illegally, and then also rearrested and wound up doing 22 months. And now he lives in Tijuana. And I feel that our immigration system is broken, it is not fair, and we need to fix it, and we need a path for citizenship for people who've been harmed by being in limbo in this system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Janessa.
Well, this is a great example of why this seat is so important, because this should have been a no-brainer vote to authorize funding for the Legal Defense Fund. We live in a border community. We live in a community that has refugees and immigrants from multiple different parts of the world, and we know that our immigration system is broken, that our enforcement system is broken, and that there are so many tragedies within our community because of it. And so I would absolutely want to prioritize and expand the fund so that it can continue to do the important work that it does. You know, my career started working with refugee communities and diaspora communities, particularly from the Sudanese, from Sudan and from other parts of the region. And I have a lot of friends who have struggled trying to get their feet under them and be able to survive economically here because of the way our system is set up and really set up to fail in many ways. One thing that I think a lot about is in San Diego County, we consistently have every 3 to 4 months a bubble of humanity that desperately needs our help, whether that those are folks coming across the border or fleeing persecution and seeking asylum, or folks right here in our own backyard who are escaping a wildfire, or a lot of folks who have been displaced by rising rents and are now sleeping on the streets. And so one thing, when we had the crisis during the pandemic with the migrant children, we opened the convention center, we made that a home, and we made it a way to humanely process folks and get them where they needed to go. San Diego County always has this need, so why don't we have an emergency shelter that meets that need, where we could bring in services for different populations and make sure that people are not living in tents or under the open sun or on hot pavement. So that's something I'd like to see the county explore, so that we have a place where people can go and be treated with the dignity and respect they deserve while they are in a very uncomfortable and transition part of their life.
Thank you.
Monica.
So yes, thank you for the question, and I absolutely would support the allocation for the Legal Defense Fund. At the City of San Diego, we have had to supplement this type of funding for legal aid and for our eviction protection program because some of the state and federal funding that we were receiving had restrictions on it. So we had to make sure that we were filling in the gap to ensure that folks who are immigrating to our country had the same protections, had the same rights, and had the same resources. So we have done that and shown support in the past. I will continue to show support in the future because it's extremely important. And when we talk about our advocacy at the federal and state level, I would love to explore some of those restrictive laws and take those barriers away because we were able to help a lot of people that were in need, that contribute to our society every single day. And so doing that is extremely, extremely important. And I also just want to go over to the other side of this and bring in the criminal legal system. When I worked for the ACLU, I was not working directly on the SB 54 campaign, but I was certainly involved in that. And that law helped to prohibit local law enforcement officials from communicating with ICE. and the like with information and data about people who were not yet citizens, right? And so I think we have to go back and monitor the progress of that, because we know that the Sheriff's Department and in the past the Police Department has been sharing that type of information. So I think that includes, when we talk about lawful application, there are laws on the books that we need to follow, and there are laws that we need to strengthen in this area.
Thank you.
And again, if any of you wish to add a comment or respond in any respect, you have 30 seconds.
I would like to say one thing. Over the last couple of years, as the United States left Afghanistan, finally, I was part of the effort to help bring our Afghan allies back to the United States. These are people who volunteered to help the U.S. as translators or guides in Afghanistan. And obviously that war has had multiple echelons of tragedy and really should make us examine how and when we use military force abroad. But we made a promise to those people, and when it became a political problem, we brought them home. There was a lot of political will there. We don't necessarily have that same political will for everyone, and we need to change that.
Thank you. Any other comments or responses? All right.
I'm committed as supervisor to have a Spanish-speaking staff member in District 4. The largest percentage of Latinos is in District 4, and there are so many pressing needs. And hablo un poco de español, me juegue fútbol rápido hace muchos años. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you again, all of you. Our next question is on the topic of health and human services, and the question will be posed by co-moderator Drew Sitton, who is a member of St. Paul's Cathedral and also a representative of the San Diego Community News.
Faith communities and congregations, as well as social service agencies, have a long history of supporting our neighbors experiencing health and financial challenges. Given the high cost of living in our region, more and more San Diegans are turning to these organizations for support. However, funding for the services the county is obligated to provide is not sufficient to allow people to thrive. Here's the question. As supervisor, what steps would you take to ensure that services for residents of all ages and abilities are fully funded to ensure that every San Diegan can live well? And how would you foster collaboration rather than competition among service providers?
And Janessa, you'll go first.
Thank you so much for this question. This is certainly, the county for many years was the sleeping giant here in our region. They sort of sat on their hands during the homelessness crisis. The homelessness crisis spiraled when Hepe was breaking out all across the city of San Diego. The board said, well, this isn't really our problem, that's the city's problem. And in recent years, we've seen what it looks like when we have engaged supervisors who are willing to tap into an $8 billion budget and put it to work. But I think we've really only scratched the surface. And what I mean by that is there are still lots of resources out there that the county has not gone after. Our county gets its butt kicked by other counties across the state when it comes to per capita federal funding. We need to make sure we have the right people with the right mentality who are going to aggressively go after every possible dollar that exists. We also need to take a hard look at our reserve fund. In 2018, when the board was all Republican supervisors, Democrats made a lot of noise about the fact that the county was sitting on a $2.4 billion reserve fund, and that is 3 times what the state says is a fiscally responsible amount for us to have. In 2023, even though we've had a Democratic majority for the last few years, the reserve fund is still $2.4 billion. So when we get into the weeds on parsing around whether or not we have enough resources, I think we need to really lean in. We obviously want to be fiscally responsible, but if we've got 3 times what we say we need, there's enough to go around. And finally, when it comes to county contracting, there has been, I've heard from a lot of organizations as I've gone through this process and talked to folks, that there's often the community organizations who are grassroots, who are doing the work, they might not have the infrastructure to go after, spend the time and resources to go after some of these bigger grants because they're very complicated. So I'd like to work with community organizations that are doing the work in our communities to figure out a way to streamline the process so they get the resources they need to do the important work that they're doing.
Monica.
So yes, and I think we've talked quite a bit already just about the idea of prevention, right? And we know that the social services and our religious communities and institutions really hold our people up with the services that you all provide. And so we did a study, that I talk about quite often at the City of San Diego around a homelessness strategy and plan. And within that, one of the larger components or one of the recommendations said that we have to expand our procurement process. So we cannot keep doing the same thing over and over. We love our service providers that we have relationships with, but there's sort of a circle that always receives the funding, right? And so when we're talking about breaking down those barriers and creating a culture that it is not so competitive and everyone's going after a same smaller pot, we need to enlarge that pot and also make sure that we are bringing these grassroots organizations that are doing the work to the table to understand the processes. In my office, we have created building capacity and seminars so that people can come to so that they can learn some of the complications, but also learn who is doing the work in that space. So I think in order to create a culture of collaboration, we have to continue to do those types of things, but we have to honor the work that is being done at the grassroots level. That has been something that I have also brought to the table with my community governance model, where we are taking community input, we are building coalition with organizations so that we understand the needs and we can go back and make those decisions we need to make in the budgetary process and in other processes in order to make sure that our communities and our organizations that are providing these services are getting everything they need.
Thank you. And Amy.
Well, I shared my faith journey, how I was raised Jewish, had a bat mitzvah, went to Hebrew school, I even went to Hebrew camp. And that's just part of my faith journey. You see, when I was 30 years old and I was 8 months pregnant, that's when my dad, who was only 56 years old, died of complications of multiple sclerosis. And then 5 weeks later, after completely normal pregnancy, my daughter Ashley was born in a coma and then died in my arms 3 days later. After that, I had a crisis. I was diagnosed with major depression, PTSD, and I turned to alcohol. And well, since we're in a church, I guess I'll share the rest of my faith story. When I was 35 years old, I became a Christian, and I've been sober for the past 20 years. I am a big believer in reaching out to our faith-based organizations who are doing the hard work. I was a Celebrate Recovery leader for many years, and I've led thousands of people who are struggling with mental health issues and addiction issues into treatment and recovery. We'll talk about this later with homelessness, but right now the state's program with Housing First prohibits the use of state and federal funding for treatment programs. And I have spoken with people with lived experiences and stakeholders in our community. Solutions and Change for Change, and Vista is doing great work. The SD Rescue Mission also, and the East County Transitional Living Center. And the fact of the matter is we need to rely on them who are doing the hard work and they're getting results, and we need to support them, and we need to not only give them county funds, but also state and federal. Thank you.
All right, again, any of you who wish can take 30 seconds to add a comment or respond.
No, I just want to say that one thing that our religious institutions and places of faith bring to this is dignity for the people who are having to receive services. And I can remember as a 20-year-old coming back from Atlanta, Georgia, which was my dream to go to college there, and my mom having to take care of me, what it felt like to lose dignity while you are waiting on these types of resources. And so I think it really should be prioritized because we absolutely need the money, but the dignity is so important.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you again. Our next question is on the subject of public safety. And the question will be posed by Bishop Cornelius Bowser, pastor of the Charity Apostolic Church.
Grace and peace to each of you. Since 2006, more than 220 people have died inside San Diego County jails. In 2022, the state auditor issued a blistering report that found San Diego County Sheriff's Department failed to prevent and respond to deaths in the county jail. So my question is, if elected, what steps would you take to prevent further deaths and hold our law enforcement accountable?
And Monica, you get to go first.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bishop, for the question. So one of the most important roles, I think, as a County Board of Supervisor is to hold our law enforcement officials accountable. There are, specifically with this subject, the charter only allows certain things. So the state is working on providing an oversight board and a law that would mandate that the jail death reports be published to our oversight committees and the like. I know one part of that law was stricken about the oversight boards that the Board of Supervisors could have control over, but certainly I believe that anything that promotes transparency and accountability is very, very important, because the job, if you have a job where you can carry a gun and you have immunity, if you hurt or kill someone, then the accountability level needs to be high. This is something that is scary for a lot of politicians to talk about, because you will face attacks for telling the truth. But the truth is, we need law enforcement and we need accountability, just like in every other area of life. And so my work has been, to build out, I talk with my hands a lot, a public safety ecosystem, a holistic infrastructure that includes law enforcement for violent crime. But we know law enforcement is reactive, not necessarily proactive. So that ecosystem includes social workers, it includes violence interrupters, it includes so many people that can provide safety for us as a holistic approach. I will continue to work on that at the county. I think the county is primed for that type of work. It has the infrastructure through Health and Human Services, and I'm really looking forward to that part of the work.
Amy.
What's happening in our local jails is completely unacceptable. There's been state audits, just as you've said, and there's been grand jury investigations. And right now, what's happening in our jails is a result of people who are clearly distributing signs of mental distress, or they have severe addiction, and they're being sent to jail. And our jails are not built, nor are they staffed to be able to care for people who are experiencing a mental health crisis or who are going through withdrawal. And so what we're seeing is, we're seeing historic highs of people who are being put in situations where they're committing suicide or they're overdosing or horrifically being murdered in our jails. And so we need accountability. After my daughter passed away, it wasn't just an accident that she passed away. It was a greedy HMO that caused her death. And we fought for justice for my daughter and accountability. And that's exactly what we need from our sheriff's department. They need to be held accountable for this. But I also believe that people who are struggling with mental health issues and drug addiction issues, they shouldn't be sent to jail. If they have committed a serious crime, what we need to do is we need to divert them to mandatory treatment. I believe it's not an option anymore, jail or treatment. The most loving thing we can do to save their life is say, it's mandatory treatment. I also believe that everyone that enters a jail facility should be screened for drugs. And I just want to let you know too that we also have to face the understaffing of our jails right now, and I believe we need to address that ASAP, because when people are overworked, 16, 18 hours every week, and they're being forced to work on their days off, their mental health is suffering too. Thank you.
And Janessa.
The situation in our county jails is completely unacceptable. If you had a department in any organization where people were consistently dying, that would be the first most pressing priority for you. And that's what's happening in our county jails. And we've had a state audit, as you mentioned. The reports, or the recommendations are well known. I think it is incumbent, even before we have a state law that gives us direct authority over the sheriff's department, to bring the sheriff's department in on a regular basis and hear how the results of the audit or mitigation are going. To have that conversation face to face, because I know firsthand in any Marine Corps inspection, if you're not out there physically looking at it or talking to the people in charge, it's easy to sort of let things go by and not become a priority. So as a supervisor, I would want to hear directly from the Sheriff's Department every month on what the steps they were taking, what hiccups they were facing, and how we could put more elbow grease into solving the problem. As has been said up here, one of the #1 issues is that we have a lack of trained psychiatric staff and medical professionals in the jails. If anyone has ever spent time in a county jail, you'll know that the facilities are atrocious, the pay is extraordinarily low, and so it's very tough to recruit non-sworn officers, medical officers, to come and work in the county jail. So while we absolutely want to stop making the county jails our region's largest mental health provider, which is the absurd reality that we have now, in the meantime, if we're sending people to jail, a sentence to jail should not be a sentence to death. We need to provide them with appropriate care. So I would want to incentivize hiring those people so that we can take care of the people who are already behind bars and make sure we don't have another death. As Amy mentioned, screening people for drugs coming into the jails is a no-brainer. That absolutely needs to be on the table. It will require more manpower and more resources. We have $100 million coming from an opioid settlement that the county will be receiving soon, and some of that money should go into screening so that dangerous drugs are not entering our facilities as well.
Thank you.
Now, any of you wish to add any comments or respond? Amy?
When I was in college at San Diego State University, I worked as a student worker at Juvenile Hall. My job description was the same as the deputy probation officers, and I can tell you one of the saddest places at Juvenile Hall is the suicide watch area. And so I believe that as county supervisor, we also have a responsibility to our juveniles and to their mental health. And so just as we will address the jail issues, we must also address Juvenile Hall. Thank you.
Any other comment? All right, thank you again. Our next question is on the subject of climate change, creating a sustainable future. And the question will be posed by the Reverend Richard and Carolyn Leaf, members of St. Paul's Cathedral.
With more heat waves, California droughts, and more wildfires anticipated,
what are your plans regarding funding and resources to slow down these threats?
And Amy, you go first.
Me?
You.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I was really proud to accept the endorsement of the San Miguel firefighters last year when I ran against Nathan Fletcher. And the reason why they supported me is they know that we have a real crisis in facing wildfires right here in San Diego. How many of you have lived in San Diego and have been evacuated before during a wildfire? Yes, you understand. I've also been evacuated. This is a real threat. And just yesterday, I got an email from somebody, and she lives in the unincorporated part of District 4, and she said there was a culvert, and it was overgrown, and it was becoming a fire hazard. And she had tried to reach out to Caltrans, she's tried to reach out to the county. Of course, there's really not any service for people for District 4 right now because Nathan Fletcher has resigned. So she reached out to me, and I got back to her in 15 minutes, and I said, I'm gonna help you. And I immediately reached out to the San Miguel firefighters, and they've already dispatched help to make sure that that culvert is cut down and that community is protected from fire. So one of the things that I believe that the county can do in order to help our climate ASAP is to make it easier for people to work remotely. I think that's going to be best for decarbonization, to reduce emissions and greenhouse gases, to reduce congestion on our freeways. And so what I would like to see is true leadership at the county level to encourage businesses to do more remote working, and also for the county itself to institute remote working for its 20,000 workers, who, by the way, the county is the third largest employer in the county of San Diego. So the county must lead in this issue. Thank you.
Janessa.
Well, I'm very proud to have been able to work on some really impactful pieces of legislation over the course of my career as a policy advocate, both at the state level, but primarily at the federal level. Last year, worked directly with the Biden administration to pass to establish 3 new national monuments protecting over 550,000 acres of land across the country. We were able to do this by building coalitions that were led by communities, often by indigenous communities who had been tending to the land for a very long time. And all of this is part of the president's current effort to protect 30% of America's lands and waterways by the year 2030. So getting to play a small role in that process was really impactful. When I think about the county and what some of the biggest issues that we face are, obviously increasing threat from wildfire. Wildfire season is all year round now, and our firefighters are incredibly short-staffed. I'm proud to be endorsed by our county firefighters, and I've spoken to them about their needs, and one of them is just for us to invest in them so they have the appropriate manning, because they're also on the front lines of the homelessness crisis. But the biggest thing that we can do to address the climate crisis here in San Diego County is reduce emissions. And so we need to work as quickly as possible to get folks to live near where they work. One way the county could step up and lead in this is by investing in workforce housing on county land for county employees like our social workers and our janitors and our psychiatric nurses who are having trouble staying in the county because it is so expensive. But build housing close to where they live, so that, or where they work, so that their commutes are shorter and they're not having to commute from 45 minutes away and staying on the road. And second, we have obviously a major issue with the Tijuana River Valley. That is something that has been an emergency for several years. We do not have sufficient funding. I would make it a priority to work with the federal government to make sure that we not only have the resources to address it, but that we are actively going after things like climate infrastructure, resilient infrastructure funding coming from things like the bipartisan infrastructure law.
And Monica.
Thank you so much for the question. We know that climate change is real, and I have been at the forefront of a lot of the environmental justice issues that we are dealing with as a region. I was the first woman to serve on the inaugural board of the San Diego Community Power Entity, which the county now sits on as well, and that is an entity that will provide clean power, renewable energy to the members of the county. That's extremely important as we talk about meeting our climate action goals. In addition, I have also supported the Climate Equity Index at the City of San Diego and want to do something like that at the county, especially for our unincorporated areas. And what that index does is tell us where our most vulnerable communities are that need the most resources, so that we could use that tool when we are budgeting for our most vulnerable communities, especially when it comes to wildfire and other impacts of climate change. I also don't support sprawl and development. I support and believe that we have to fulfill the mandates that the state has given us. And at the county, there has recently been passed a new vehicle miles traveled standard. I believe in that standard, and I think that as we talk about climate change, it is going to take some sacrifice from all of us, and that's what the VMT standard does entail. We do have to build housing. There are ways to do that in 2023. We have to build housing and we have to meet our climate action goals. We can do both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. But this is an area where I will continue to fight for our rural communities, especially that are experiencing severe levels of wildfire, and we can see now in the reports that we have this heat, the weather changes, things across the nation and within San Diego. We'll continue to fight for it. Thank you.
And again, if any of you would like to add a comment, you have 30 seconds.
I just want to tell a quick story. Many folks might remember when President Trump was in office, he was doing a bill signing. He held up the bill and he said, I'm very proud of Yosemite, and he meant Yosemite, which was a very interesting slip of the tongue. Maybe he's never been to a national park, but in any case, that was a bill. He was signing a bill called the Great American Outdoors Act, one of the largest investments in climate and conservation in 50 years. And our organization led that. We were able to do that during a Republican administration by making it a priority for Republican governors in states that needed to get reelected. I say that all to say, I ran out of time. Okay, I'll try to tag it on the next time. Thanks for holding me accountable.
Any other comments that you wish to add? All right, thank you. Our next question is on the topic of the mental health crisis, fentanyl deaths, and drug overdoses. The question will be posed by Angel Ibarra, who is a member of the Episcopal Community Services.
Good evening. Like Judge Jim said, my name is Angel Ibarra, and I'm here representing Episcopal Community Services. We are an organization deeply invested in San Diego's well-being. Through our Central East Regional Recovery Center in City Heights, we've witnessed the devastating impact the mental health and fentanyl crisis has, and we're recognizing the connection between mental health and substance abuse. Our goal is comprehensive solutions that address these challenges for a healthier, more resilient community. According to data sourced from the County of San Diego Medical Examiner's Office, the number of accidental fentanyl overdose deaths increased by 2,345% countywide, from 33 deaths in 2016 to 807 deaths in 2021. How would you address this epidemic, and what course of action would you take to prevent further deaths? How would you plan to collaborate with DA Summer Stefan?
And Janessa, you go first.
Okay. Yeah, this is a really personal one for me. I was actually at a funeral earlier this week for a member of my campaign team's youngest brother who accidentally overdosed. He played high school football and was trying to mitigate his pain and took a pill that he bought from off the street, and it killed him. And he was barely 25 years old. This is sweeping through our communities. Fentanyl is the leading cause of death for people under the age of 45 in this country. That's absolutely insane. And it has touched so many folks in our communities in a very personal way. There are a number of things that we have to do. First is education, ensuring that our community is aware of what is out there and how little can actually kill someone. We also need to make sure that people have access to Narcan. This is a life-saving nasal spray that can reverse the effects of an overdose immediately until paramedics and emergency folks can get there. And we just don't have it in enough places. It should be everywhere, just the way we have AED defibrillators in every building now. And we could make that happen in a very short amount of time so that people have access to that. And finally, we have to provide law enforcement with the resources to stop these dangerous drugs from coming into our communities. And we have to provide treatment options for people who are addicted. Right now, we do not have an appropriate number of detox beds in our county. We do not have an appropriate number of addiction counselors. There are people out there who are struggling, who want help. Right now, if you are on the street and you are addicted and you want to seek treatment, the answer is here's a card, call this number every day for the next few days at this time every day, and we'll see if we can get you into a spot. Anyone who's ever known anyone struggling with addiction knows that that is not a realistic way to get someone into treatment. So the county needs to prioritize opening treatment facilities quickly, at the same time working on these preventative measures.
Monica?
Yeah, I think we've had this question before on our circuit, our forum circuit, and we really have similar views on this. I also agree that Narcan should certainly be more available. We made it available at MTS with the security that is on the line, and that has saved lives. We have seen videos where it has saved lives, so we know that it can save lives in a lot of different areas upon availability. I also know that there's an opioid settlement where the county will be receiving more than $100 million over the next few years. I really think that that additional funding should go towards education. We should make sure that especially our young people are educated about the lethal nature of fentanyl and about how it can be hidden without us even knowing what we are taking. And so education is extremely important. In that vein, there are quite a few organizations that work with parents, foster parents, and grandparents that need additional funding to make sure that caretakers are also very much aware of what our young people in particular are facing around fentanyl. So I think all of those are extremely important. We do need more resources for people who actually want help. We are turning people away who want help and who need help. So that's certainly something that I would be advocating for. And with regard to collaborating with the DA, I'm always, as an elected official, you have to collaborate with everyone. So I am definitely want to have everyone at the table and all the different perspectives. But I have been trying to build out this public safety ecosystem because we know we have to deal with these problems holistically.
Thank you so much for all that you do, and thank you so much for wisely pointing out that there is a correlation between mental health and addiction. And right now in the county, there are kids as young as 13 years old that are overdosing from fentanyl and dying. This is a 911. And yes, as Monica pointed out, the county has received a $100 million opioid settlement. I believe that that $100 million, though, should be spent more on treatment. And I'm going to share with you something shocking. One of the ways that the county is spending that money is on safe smoking supplies, crack pipes. I believe, because of my background, that enabling is disabling. And right now, we have to save our kids. So there's preventative things that we can do, such as more widespread distribution of Narcan. We can also distribute fentanyl testing strips as well. But that's just a Band-Aid. The fact of the matter is fentanyl is flooding over our borders. And so what I believe it's going to take is a county supervisor who is willing to take this on as a regional response and work with our DA, Summer Stephan. I do believe that if you sell a drug that causes somebody to overdose or die, you should be held accountable. So I do believe that there should be stricter penalties for people who sell fentanyl that result in the deaths of people. So right now what we need is a state, federal, and county response, and we have to address and get the federal government's attention to stop the flood of fentanyl. Thank you.
Wish to add a comment?
I found it's really hard to add in 30 seconds, so
I just want to say I love how cordial we all are and civil, and I just want to thank everybody for this opportunity because community engagement is something that's really important to Janessa, Monica, and I. Thank you.
And we thank you, and we thank you for your civility as well. For the audience's benefit, I want to indicate that the questions that have been posed here had been submitted to the panel prior to this evening's event so that they had an opportunity to at least prepare some remarks. But because you've been so good about keeping in the time limits, we do have time for a few additional questions from the audience, which you have not seen before. So I'm going to pose a couple of questions, and if we have time, Drew has a couple questions to pose as well. The first question is, as supervisor, how would you increase safety on public transportation? And Monica, you can go first.
Yes, it's a really good question. So right now I serve at...
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to give you all 1 minute.
1 minute. Okay.
1 minute.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So I serve on the MTS board and also the chair of public security. And what we have found through the study that I talked about, the community action plan on homelessness, was that many people, because of this cycle of poverty, were receiving a lot of tickets on the transit line, and it was prohibiting them from getting the type of housing and everything that they needed because they were not able to pay the tickets. So we were trying to balance that need with a desire for them to maybe do community service in lieu of paying a ticket if they received a ticket. So I think those types of diversion programs are still very important. We are going back to the table and looking at how we can better security, but we understand that this is an issue that is going on across the nation now, and we certainly have to have security on our transit line and keep people safe and increase ridership. That's very, very important. We also don't want to criminalize people so that they are able to re-enter society.
All right. Amy, you're next on safety on public transit.
We all attended a climate action social justice forum in Hillcrest last week, and it was a room filled with 200 people, and everybody was really excited and passionate about protecting the environment, just like we are. And I posed a question to the audience. I said, raise your hand if you took public transportation to this event tonight. Only 2 people took public transportation. So during my closing remarks, I asked everyone to please commit to taking public transportation at least once by the end of July. As I talked with people in the audience, they said, you know what, I don't really feel safe taking public transportation. I was a single mom with unreliable transportation, so I know all about that. So I would absolutely be committed on a county level to make sure that people feel safe in public transportation so that they're more likely to take public transportation, which is better for our environment.
Vanessa?
Yeah, a few things. I've lived in other cities where public transit is widely used and widely available, like Washington, D.C., Chicago. And one of the things that really frustrates me about our existing system is it's very haphazard, not just in the routes and the frequency, but also if you've ever tried to board on a public transit, just paying for the app and getting onto the bus or the trolley, having paid for it can be difficult. There is oftentimes not a really clear sense of who's paid and who hasn't. So making sure that our stops are well lit and have security at them, and that there is a simple and easy way to identify if people have paid to get on the bus or the trolley, so you know if you should be there or not, is really important. We obviously don't want to criminalize people for tickets, but having a security guard at a trolley stop and better lighting at bus stops and trolley stops can go a long way to making people feel better. But as long as our transit system is infrequent and disconnected, it's still going to be a barrier for people to use it.
Thank you. Okay. The next question, which I'm going to pose first to Amy, is a broader question regarding public safety. And it is, how do you plan to address and hold accountable police officers who use excessive force, brutality, or deadly force against unarmed black and brown San Diegans?
Absolutely, and this is something that we've discussed in previous forums. No one should ever be pulled over because of the color of their skin or because of who they love. And when it comes to use of excessive force, I believe in holding people accountable. I brought up my story of holding the greedy HMO that took my daughter's life accountable. And so I am not afraid about speaking truth to power and challenging greedy corporations or racist structures for the harm that they do. Now, I will say that I do know a lot of really good-hearted San Diego police officers and San Diego sheriff's deputies. And these are good men and women who merely want to serve and protect. But I also know, just like churches are filled with imperfect people, we also know that police departments and sheriff's departments are also filled with people that need to be held accountable. Thank you.
Janessa?
Yeah, we know that in our community here, the data shows that that Black and brown communities and the LGBTQ community are over-policed, in particular our trans family members, and that their experiences can be very violent and even deadly. And, whoa, I just got way loud. And as you said, there are very good people serving in uniform, and there are folks serving in our agencies who need to be held accountable when their actions are inappropriate, when they use excessive force, when they consistently abuse their power. And I believe if you believe in a system, or you believe that something, you want to make something better, you want to root out things that are broken or causing pain. When I served in the Marine Corps, I was a uniform victims advocate. Our sexual assault reporting and investigation system was horrifically flawed, and victims were often left totally on their own. In our law enforcement, we know we have deep-seated problems that are structural. We also know that there are folks who have gone without having accountability, and we need to make sure that we are holding them accountable to the fullest extent.
Monica.
Okay, I'll try to do 1 minute. I have, in my last 5 years, supported police officer budgets. I have supported recruitment, requests for funding for additional recruitment and retention. I've supported lateral bonuses. I've supported homeownerships that help officers stay in the community. Yet there is a campaign right now by the Police Officers Association that says anybody but Monica. And the reason for that is because I hold our police department accountable. I hold law enforcement accountable for these bad acts that we are talking about. Excessive force, stopping Black and brown people at rates that are 4 times higher than their white counterparts, even though they do not have contraband. All of those things need to continue to be brought to light. And I've already, taken quite a few hits. This is not hypothetical for me. This is what I do because I do believe in an equitable society.
This next question is a little more obscure, and I'm going to ask Janessa to respond first. The state of California is looking to implement some kind of statewide road charge, which may likely involve the tracking of vehicles via telemetrics. Do you support this model? And if so, how do you reconcile that with the need for privacy protection?
Yeah, so I believe this is in reference to a conversation that's been a hot topic here in San Diego County, vehicle road charge, which is looking to replace the gas tax as we move to more electric vehicles. And it's something that has caused a lot of consternation because people don't want to be charged for how many miles they travel. They're fearful that could cause them hundreds of extra dollars every year coming out of their pocket. And I agree with that. I think it's bad policy. I don't think we should make up out of the pockets of working and middle class people some of the revenue we're losing from gas tax. That said, we are going to have to figure out a way as we move to more electric vehicles on the road, how we're going to have sustained funding for our infrastructure. That includes roads, that includes our wastewater systems. And so we're going to have to think more creatively about that. But I don't support an additional tax on California drivers that is really taking money out of the pockets of working and middle class families.
Monica?
Yeah, I want to, sorry, you can clap.
Sorry.
I really want to go to the surveillance piece of this. And of course, you know, this has been a very hot topic, and I can't commit to anything until I read through a policy at that point. But the surveillance piece of this is a very interesting piece, and it's something that we're facing in the state of California. It's something that we had a robust discussion about in City Council yesterday around how do we control these types of technologies and the ability for government to retrieve them and surveil people. And I do think that technology is very, very important, but I also think there needs to be parameters and framework around how we are able to use those technologies. And we need to be truthful and transparent as government officials about the way that we use this technology. I championed, along with community members alongside me, a surveillance ordinance and a privacy advisory board at the City of San Diego. I think we need a broader model of that.
And Amy.
I have spoken up early and often against the mileage tax, and the reason why I am so concerned about it is that it's still in the 2021 Regional Transportation Plan, Chapter 3. Now, they're moving on to the new Regional Transportation Plan, but it has not been released yet. So I consider it the alligator that's still in the water, and it's still posing a threat to us. So there's the road usage charge that might come in the form of San Diego County doing that at the SANDAG level, but also the state might do it too. So I just want to say categorically today, I am 100% against it, because none of the funds actually go towards improving our roads. And I'm a freedom person. I am 1,000% against the government putting any kind of tracking device in my vehicle.
Okay, this is most likely going to be the very last question of the night. And it is, have you been offered campaign contributions that you have either rejected or returned? And is there any individual, organization, or group that you would not accept money from? Monica, you're first.
Yeah, I have rejected money from county lobbyists. Of course, we are not allowed to accept that. But of course, you know, my team is very diligent. We have said out front that we will not accept money from fossil fuel companies, from county lobbyists, certainly not from police unions. And so we have a very grassroots effort going on with regard to our donations and our contributors. That has been something I've exercised since 2018, since I first ran, and it's something that I will continue to do.
Amy.
Every single one of my contributions have been from individual donors. For the supervisor race, none of us are able to accept any contributions from businesses at all. So you can know that when it comes to the supervisor race, the money that we're raising is from individuals. But I want to give you guys some inside baseball about what really happens in politics. And it's called the independent expenditure. And that's when a group can come in and they can say, oh, I'm going to give $50,000 to this candidate. They have to report it, but what they can do is they will do something on their own, like a mailer that arrives at your home. So here is your homework. The next time you get a mailer from any candidate, this election or next, make sure you read the fine print in the back, because you need to see who it is paid for and what special interests are trying to be the puppet masters in this county.
Janessa.
Yeah, as has been said, we can only accept contributions from individuals. I'm really proud that my campaign has received over 700 individual contributions. from folks across our county, the most of any candidate, representing a really strong grassroots effort that's funding our campaign. As Amy said, independent expenditures are the thing that I think are really twisting our politics. It doesn't matter how much an individual candidate raises and can communicate with you. Independent expenditures can come in at any point and blanket the airwaves with a message to get their candidate of choice elected. And so until we have public funding of elections, we're going to continue to see our warped democracy influenced by big money that is hard for most people to understand. I'm a firm believer in public funding for elections and getting special interest money out of our politics, but that's the system that we're in now, and you're going to see mailers and ads for all of us that none of us authorized or asked for, because that's how the system works right now.
Well, my watch says it's 8 o'clock, and thank you all for your fine contributions and presentation here tonight. On behalf of myself and all the sponsoring organizations, first of all, I want to echo what Reverend Penny said at the beginning, and that is to thank you all for being candidates, for being willing to run for this important office. And I also, on behalf of myself and the audience here, want to say we are fortunate to have 3 such well-spoken, intelligent, and dedicated candidates. So we're very grateful. And we invite the winning candidate amongst you to meet with the sponsoring organizations before you take office. Thank you again for your participation tonight.
Thank you.
Closing prayer, if you wouldn't mind closing your eyes, taking a deep breath. Let us pray. Gracious one, thank you for raising up leaders in every generation to confront the issues and the challenges of our times. I pray that as these 3 candidates move forward, you bless them and guide them. Give them an ability to see these challenges as opportunities and to help us pursue justice, mercy, and compassion, not only as individuals, but as a society. Bless their leadership, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.